Hi, I'm Noah. I used to believe that if you were good enough, patient enough, your family would always stand by you. That blood was thicker than, well, anything. But then came a day when I realized sometimes family isn't the safe haven you imagine. Sometimes it's the place where you're hurt the most, where the silence cuts deeper than any shout. And if you've ever thought your family could never turn their back on you, if you've ever poured your heart into people who just didn't seem to see you, stay with me until the end. Because some stories, the ones that really change you, only truly begin when you realize you've been left behind. And what you do with that realization, that's everything. It was supposed to be a celebration. My sister Harper had just hit 50,000 followers on her social media platform. 50,000. The number itself felt significant, at least to her, and by extension, to my parents, Patricia and Robert. Our living room was crammed with balloons, a "Congrats Harper" banner strung a little crookedly over the fireplace, and a buffet table groaning under the weight of store-bought platters. Harper, of course, was beaming, phone in hand, documenting every moment for her audience. She was launching a live stream, a special Q&A, and the energy in the room was, well, it was Harper's energy. Loud, a little forced, but undeniably hers. I was mostly trying to stay out of the way, nursing a lukewarm soda in the corner. I'd always been the quiet one, the background hum to Harper's vibrant melody. She was the performer, the one who craved the spotlight, and my parents, they loved to watch her shine. I'd helped her set up the tech, made sure the Wi-Fi was strong, the lighting decent. That was my usual role, the behind-the-scenes guy. I didn't mind it, usually. Or at least, I'd told myself I didn't. Then, right as she was about to go live, thanking her amazing tribe for their support, the stream glitched. The connection sputtered, froze, then died. Harper's face, mid-effusive smile, twisted into an ugly scowl. "What the hell?" she hissed, her voice a stark contrast to the saccharine tones she used for her followers. Her eyes, sharp and accusing, immediately found mine. "Noah, what did you do?" "I told you this was important." I blinked, taken aback. "I didn't do anything, Harper. It's probably just the internet. Sometimes it—" "Oh, save it," she snapped, frantically tapping at her phone. "You probably unplugged something. You're always fiddling." My chest tightened. I haven't touched anything since we set it up. My voice was quiet, but firm. I looked towards my parents, expecting them to mediate, to say something reasonable. My mother, Patricia, just wrung her hands, her gaze darting between Harper and the dead phone screen. "Oh dear," she murmured. "Harper, honey, maybe just try restarting it?" My father, Robert, cleared his throat. He was a man of few words, and those he did offer were usually to smooth things over, to maintain the peace, even if it meant sacrificing fairness. He looked at me, not with anger, but with a kind of weary resignation that cut far deeper. "Noah," he said, his voice low, "maybe just check the router? For Harper's sake. Let's not spoil her big moment." And just like that, it was my fault. Not the internet, not a random glitch. Me. I was the disruption. The unspoken accusation hung heavy in the air. "Noah, you're ruining things again." Harper was already back to troubleshooting, muttering about unreliable brothers. My mother was fussing around her, offering platitudes. My father was pointedly looking anywhere but at me. It wasn't the accusation itself that broke something in me. I was used to being the family scapegoat, the convenient explanation for any minor inconvenience. It was the silence from my parents, the complete, unwavering way they sided with Harper, without a single question, without even a glance of consideration towards me. It was the realization, dawning cold and clear, that in their eyes, I was expendable. My feelings, my truth, it didn't weigh enough on the scale to even warrant a pause. I wasn't just in the background, I was becoming invisible. The hurt was a physical ache, a hollowness spreading through my chest. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something much colder, much more profound. It was the chilling understanding that I was utterly, completely alone, even in a room full of family. The balloons suddenly looked garish, the banner a mockery. This wasn't a celebration. It was just another scene in a long-running play where I was an unwilling, uncredited extra. And in that moment, something inside me just snapped. Not with a bang, but with a quiet, decisive click. The wounds you can't see, you know? They're often the ones that change everything. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice or try to defend myself. What was the point? Their verdict was already in. I just nodded, a small, almost imperceptible movement, and said, "Okay." I didn't go check the router. Instead, I turned and walked out of the living room, the sounds of Harper's rising frustration and my mother's anxious cooing fading behind me. I went upstairs to my room, the one I'd grown up in, the one that suddenly felt like a stranger's space. There was no dramatic flounce, no slammed doors, just a quiet closing of a chapter. I pulled out the old backpack I used for camping trips, the one that had seen better days. Methodically, I started packing. A few changes of clothes, my toothbrush, the worn copy of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius that had been my quiet companion for years. I hesitated over a framed photo of me and Harper as kids, smiling gap-toothed on a beach. For a second, a wave of something, nostalgia maybe, or a deeper, more primal grief, washed over me. I left it on the nightstand. Some things you just can't take with you. I counted the cash in my wallet, $347. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. I didn't take anything that wasn't undeniably mine. No keepsakes that tied me to them, no mementos of a life that suddenly felt like a poorly rehearsed play. My laptop, though, that was essential. It held my work, my notes, the fragments of ideas I'd been piecing together for years. Downstairs, the Harper show had apparently resumed. I could hear the forced brightness of her voice, the live stream probably back up and running. No one had come to check on me. No one had even noticed I was gone for more than 5 minutes. That, more than anything, cemented my resolve. It wasn't a rash decision, born of anger. It was a slow dawning, painful clarity. I didn't belong here. Not anymore. Maybe I never truly did. I walked out the front door without a word, backpack slung over one shoulder. The evening air was cool, carrying the scent of cut grass from a neighbor's lawn. It felt strangely liberating. The streetlights cast long shadows as I walked towards the main road, towards the bus stop. The last city bus into downtown was due in 10 minutes. I sat on the cold metal bench, the backpack a comforting weight beside me. The bus wheezed to a halt, its doors sighing open. I paid my fare and found a seat at the back, staring out the window as my childhood neighborhood receded into the darkness. There was no dramatic music, no tearful goodbyes. Just the rumble of the engine and the hiss of the air brakes, carrying me towards an unknown future. Downtown was a blur of late-night lights and shuttered storefronts. I got off at the central terminal, the air thick with the smell of diesel fumes and stale coffee. I knew I couldn't afford a proper hotel, not for long. My phone showed a few rundown motels a couple of blocks away, places that rented by the week or even by the night, no questions asked. I picked the cheapest one I could find online, the Starlight Inn, a name far grander than the reality. The lobby was dim, smelling faintly of stale cigarettes and desperation. The night clerk, a tired-looking man with kind eyes, barely glanced at my ID before handing me a key attached to a large plastic fob. My room was on the second floor, overlooking a noisy alley. The lock felt flimsy. Inside, the air was heavy with the cloying scent of bleach, a futile attempt to mask years of neglect and transient lives. The single bed had a thin, pilled blanket. A small, flickering TV was bolted to the wall. There was a tiny, stained bathroom. I dropped my backpack on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed. The springs creaked in protest. And then, the silence. Not the comfortable silence of solitude, but the crushing silence of utter isolation. The sounds from the alley, a distant siren, a couple arguing, the clatter of bins, only amplified the emptiness inside me. Despair, cold and heavy, settled in. This was it. This was the first step into whatever came next. And honestly, in that moment, huddled in that bleak, anonymous room, I had no idea if I had the strength to take another. The loneliness was a physical presence, a suffocating weight. The first few days were a blur. I mostly stayed in that grim motel room, the bleach smell becoming a grimly familiar companion. Sleep was fitful, punctuated by the noises from the alley and the racing thoughts in my own head. I ate cheap takeout, instant noodles, whatever I could afford that didn't require cooking. The $347 were dwindling fast. The despair I'd felt that first night hadn't lifted. It had just settled, becoming a dull ache in my chest. I knew I couldn't stay there, wallowing. I had to do something. But what? My old life, my tutoring gigs that had once provided a steady, if modest, income, felt a million miles away. They were all tied to my family's social circle, to the world I had just walked away from. One morning, driven by the need for caffeine and a change of scenery, however slight, I found a tiny cafe near the bus station. It was called the Daily Grind, a small, unpretentious place with mismatched chairs and the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee. I ordered the cheapest black coffee they had and sat at a small table by the window, watching the city wake up. There was a corkboard by the counter, cluttered with flyers for local bands, yoga classes, and people offering services: dog walking, house cleaning, guitar lessons. An idea, faint at first, began to form. I still had my laptop. I still had my knowledge. I'd spent years as an SAT and college prep tutor, helped build academic content for that small education startup Harper was now, presumably, using. Maybe I could start again, from scratch, here. I bought a stack of index cards and a marker from a nearby convenience store. Back at the cafe, nursing another coffee, I wrote out a simple ad: experienced SAT college prep tutor, math, English, study skills, affordable rates, Noah M. I included the public email address I'd set up on the motel's spotty Wi-Fi. I tacked a few cards onto the cafe's corkboard, and then, feeling a tiny spark of something that wasn't despair, I walked around the neighborhood, pinning them up in laundromats, community centers, anywhere that had a public notice board. It felt like casting messages in a bottle out into a vast, indifferent ocean. For a week, nothing. The silence from my email inbox was as profound as the silence from my family. The money was almost gone. I started rationing my food, one meal a day. The motel owner was starting to give me pointed looks. Just when I was about to hit rock bottom, thinking I'd have to look for shelter work, an email pinged. Interested in SAT tutoring for my son, David. My heart leaped. I met Maria, David's mom, at the Daily Grind. She was a single mother, working 2 jobs, desperate for her son to have a better chance than she did. David was a bright kid, a bit lost in the system, overwhelmed by the pressure of the exams. We started working together, right there in the cafe, amidst the clatter of cups and the hiss of the espresso machine. He was struggling with geometry, and as I explained a concept, breaking it down into simple, understandable steps, I saw that flicker of understanding in his eyes. That aha moment. And something inside me, something I thought had died, stirred. Slowly, word began to spread. Maria told another parent. One student recommended me to a friend. My little index card ads started to bear fruit. I was tutoring a handful of students, meeting them in the cafe at the public library. I was still living hand-to-mouth, but I could afford the motel, barely. I could afford food. More importantly, I was doing something I was good at, something that mattered, even on this small, almost invisible scale. Then came the first thank you note. It was from David, a simple handwritten card. "Mr. Noah, thank you. I finally get it. I think I can actually do this." Tucked inside was a drawing of a stick figure superhero with Tutor Man written underneath. I remember sitting there in my bleak motel room, holding that card, and tears just started streaming down my face. Not tears of sadness, but of relief, of a fragile, emerging hope. It was a small thing, a kid's drawing, but it felt like a lifeline. Someone saw me. Someone valued what I could offer. These kids, these strangers, they were giving me back pieces of myself that my own family had either ignored or actively tried to erase. Each thank you, each small success with a student was like a faint but vital thread, pulling me back from the darkness, guiding me towards a sense of my own true worth. It wasn't about fame or fortune. It was about connection. It was about making a difference, however small. And in that tiny cafe, surrounded by the smell of coffee and the quiet murmur of studying, I started to feel a quiet strength bloom within me, a resilience I hadn't known I possessed. The emptiness was still there, a shadow of what I'd lost, but it wasn't all-consuming anymore. There was warmth now, too. Life settled into a new, fragile rhythm. Tutoring sessions in the mornings and afternoons, lesson planning in the evenings back at the motel, which, thanks to a steady stream of students, I could now afford without the constant gnawing anxiety. The Daily Grind became my unofficial office. The owner, a kind older woman named Sal, would always have a fresh pot of coffee ready, and never once complained about me occupying a table for hours with my books and laptop. She'd even started saving me day-old pastries. Small kindnesses, you know? They meant the world. Then, one rainy afternoon, as I was packing up after a session, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Noah, is that you? The voice was hesitant, but familiar. Leah? I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. Leah Carter. We'd been close friends in high school, part of the same nerdy academic crowd. We'd lost touch after college, life pulling us in different directions. Oh, thank God, she sounded relieved. I wasn't sure this number would still work. Noah, I heard you left home. I've been worried. How did you hear? I asked, surprised. My departure had been so quiet, so invisible, or so I thought. My mom is still friends with your mom on Facebook, Leah explained, a note of apology in her voice. Apparently, Patricia's she's been posting some vague, dramatic things about family challenges and ungrateful children. It sounded awful. Are you okay? The mention of my mother sent a familiar pang through me, but Leah's genuine concern was a balm. I'm managing, Leah. It's complicated, I bet, she said. There was a pause, then her voice dropped. Noah, there's something else, something I think you need to know. It's about Harper. My guard went up. What about her? She's launched this online academy, Leah said, her voice laced with discomfort. Harper's Prep Academy. She's positioning herself as this genius academic coach, this guru for college admissions. I felt a cold dread creep over me. I knew where this was going. And Noah, Leah's voice was gentle but firm. The materials she's using, the curriculum, the worksheets, even some of the exact phrasing in her promotional videos, it's yours. I recognized it instantly. It's the stuff you developed for that startup, the stuff you used to share with me when we were brainstorming ideas years ago. She's taken all of it. The world seemed to tilt. Stolen. Not just ideas, but my actual work. The hours, the passion, the intellectual property I'd poured my heart into, now being paraded as Harper's own genius. The 50,000 followers, the academy, it was all built on a lie. Built on me. Outrage, hot and sharp, surged through me, followed by a wave of profound heartbreak. It wasn't just about the work, it was the audacity, the calculated betrayal. Are you sure, Leah? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Positive, Noah. I even have some of your old notes you shared with me. It's a match. I'm so sorry. I sank back into my chair at the cafe, the rain outside a fitting soundtrack to the storm brewing inside me. After I hung up with Leah, a darker, more painful thought began to surface. If Harper was capable of this, what else had been a lie? A few weeks later, driven by a need for, I don't even know what, closure maybe, or just to confirm the extent of my erasure, I did something I hadn't done in months. I drove by my parents' house. It was a weekday afternoon. I knew they'd likely be out. I parked down the street, my heart pounding. I wasn't planning on going in, just seeing it. But then I saw the recycling bins by the curb, waiting for pickup. And on top of one, something caught my eye. A familiar shade of blue. I got out of the car, feeling like a spy in my own life. It was a small, unopened gift box, the kind I used to send my mother for her birthday or Mother's Day, always with a carefully chosen book and a handwritten letter. This one had my handwriting on the label. And next to it, peeking out from under some junk mail, were several envelopes, also in my handwriting, also unopened. Letters I'd sent over the years, small updates, birthday wishes, attempts to connect, never even opened. The truth hit me with the force of a physical blow. My erasure wasn't new. It wasn't a reaction to my leaving. It had been happening for years, quietly, systematically. I was a ghost in my own family long before I walked out that door. The gifts, the letters, the efforts I'd made, they hadn't just been unappreciated. They'd been discarded, unopened, worthless. The anger I'd felt about Harper's theft was now compounded by this deeper, more personal desolation. It wasn't just my work they didn't value, it was me. The clarity was bitter, yes, but it was also freeing in a strange, painful way. There were no more illusions to cling to. No more wondering if I'd misread the signs, if I'd been too sensitive. The evidence was right there, on the curb, waiting for the garbage truck. I didn't take the letters. I just got back in my car and drove away. The image of those unopened envelopes burned into my memory. The heartbreak was immense, but beneath it, something else was stirring. A cold, hard resolve. I wouldn't let them break me. I wouldn't let them erase me. Not completely. The weeks following Leah's call and the discovery of the unopened letters were a crucible. Harper's Prep Academy was gaining traction online, fueled by her flashy marketing and, I now knew, my stolen materials. Then, the attack started. Vague social media posts from Harper and my parents, hinting at a troubled family member who was spreading lies and trying to sabotage Harper's success out of jealousy. My name was never mentioned, but the implication was clear. Friends from my old life started to look at me differently, or worse, avoid me altogether. It was a campaign of whispers, of innuendo, designed to isolate me further. Then came the legal threats, cease and desist letters delivered by courier to my motel, alleging I was defaming Harper, attempting to damage her brand. They were baseless, of course. I hadn't said a word publicly, but the intent was clear, to intimidate me into silence, to crush any thought I might have of fighting back. For a moment, I felt that old despair try to claw its way back. Oh man, the weight of it all. It was immense. They had resources, connections. I had a dwindling savings account and a room in a rundown motel. But something had shifted in me. The bitter clarity I'd found had forged a new kind of strength. I wasn't the invisible, pliable Noah anymore. I'd seen the truth, raw and undeniable, and it had in a strange way set me free. They could try to smear me, to sue me, but they couldn't take away what I knew, and they couldn't take away what I was slowly, painstakingly building for myself. Instead of collapsing, I got to work, quietly, methodically. Leah, bless her heart, helped me gather evidence. She had saved some of my old emails, a few of my original curriculum outlines I'd shared with her years ago when I was excited about the educational content I was creating. These clearly predated Harper's Academy. I spent hours in the public library, using their computers to find digital forensic tools, learning how to document timestamps to trace the origin of digital content. And then I remembered something. My grandmother, my mother's mother. She had been a teacher, a fierce advocate for education, and the one family member who had always truly seen me. She understood my passion for learning, for helping others. She'd passed away a few years before all this blew up, but before she died, she had given me a small, locked wooden box. For when you need it, Noah, she'd said, her eyes twinkling. There's more to legacy than just money, you know. I had stored it away, forgetting about it in the turmoil. I drove to the small storage unit I'd rented for the few possessions I couldn't keep in the motel. There, under a pile of old textbooks, was the box. My hands trembled as I found the key she'd given me. Inside, nestled amongst a few cherished photos and her favorite fountain pen, was a legally notarized document, her will. Not the main will. I knew that had been handled by my parents, but a specific addendum, a codicil. And it stated, in clear, unequivocal terms, that all her educational materials, her lesson plans, her library of teaching resources, and any intellectual property derived from her work or inspired by her educational philosophy were bequeathed to me, Noah Mercer. She even specifically mentioned the foundational concepts I had discussed with her, the very ones I'd built my curriculum upon, the ones Harper had stolen. My grandmother had known somehow. She had seen the future, or at least she had seen me. Tears welled in my eyes. This wasn't just legal leverage, it was validation. It was a voice from the past, affirming my worth, my ownership. It was my grandmother, still looking out for me. Armed with this, and the evidence Leah and I had compiled, I didn't fire off angry emails or engage in a public shouting match. That wasn't my way. Instead, I did what I did best. I prepared. I organized the facts, and then I calmly recorded a video. Just me, sitting in my motel room, speaking directly to the camera. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't sling mud. I simply laid out the truth piece by piece. I showed my original, time-stamped documents. I showed screenshots of Harper's materials, highlighting the undeniable similarities. I read the relevant section of my grandmother's will. My voice was steady, my demeanor calm. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was seeking truth. I ended the video by saying, I believe in the power of education, and I believe in integrity. This isn't about tearing anyone down. It's about setting the record straight. I posted the video on a new anonymous YouTube channel I created and shared the link with a few trusted former colleagues and some of the parents of my current students who had heard the rumors. I didn't know what would happen, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of quiet triumph. I had stood up for myself, not with anger, but with undeniable proof. It was an awakening. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was fighting back in my own quiet, steady way. And honestly, it felt good. It felt like I was finally breathing again. The video, well, it spread faster than I could have ever imagined. It wasn't a viral sensation in the way Harper's content was, all flash and no substance, but it reached the right people: academics, educators, former colleagues of my grandmother, people in the small, niche world of college prep who valued integrity. The comments weren't inflammatory, they were thoughtful, expressions of support for me, and quiet disappointment in Harper's actions. The carefully constructed facade of Harper's Prep Academy began to crumble, not with a bang, but with the slow, steady erosion of credibility. A few days later, there was a knock on my motel room door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, my heart nearly stopped. It was my parents, Patricia and Robert, and Harper. They looked different, smaller somehow. Harper's usual bravado was gone, replaced by a sullen, resentful glare. My mother looked flustered, her eyes redrimmed. My father just looked tired, older than I remembered. "Noah," my father began, his voice strained. "Can we come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. The tiny room suddenly felt claustrophobic with the three of them in it. They looked around at the single bed, the cheap desk piled with my tutoring materials, the faint, lingering smell of bleach I'd long since grown accustomed to. I could see the judgment, the discomfort in their eyes. "We saw your video," my mother said, her voice trembling slightly. Harper scoffed, crossing her arms. "This has to stop, Noah," my father said, getting straight to the point. "This public airing of grievances, it's damaging to Harper, to the family." I presented facts, Dad. I said, my voice calm, much calmer than I felt. "The truth isn't a grievance." Harper finally spoke, her voice dripping with venom. "You're trying to ruin me, after everything I've worked for." "Worked for?" I echoed, a spark of my old hurt flaring. "Or took?" My father held up a hand, a gesture for peace or perhaps for control. "Look, Noah, we understand you're upset." And maybe, he glanced at Harper, who looked away, maybe some mistakes were made. Mistakes. That's what they called it. My mother then stepped forward, wringing her hands. "Noah, dear, we want to make this right. We've talked it over. We're prepared to offer you a settlement." A settlement. I just looked at her. "6 figures, my father said, his voice low and firm, as if announcing a generous offer. "A substantial sum. In exchange, you take down the video, you sign a non-disclosure agreement, and we all just move on from this. Put it behind us. 6 figures. There it was, the price of my silence. The price of my complicity in their lies. A year ago, that kind of money would have seemed like a lifeline, a solution to all my problems. But standing there, in that dingy motel room, looking at their strained faces, I realized something profound. I didn't want their money. Not anymore. What I wanted, what I craved, was something they couldn't give me: genuine remorse, acknowledgement, respect. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that this offer wasn't about making things right for me. It was about protecting Harper, about salvaging their family image. I looked at my hands, steady now. The tremor that used to accompany any confrontation with them was gone. I thought of the thank you notes from my students, of Sal's quiet kindness at the cafe, of my grandmother's faith in me. I had built something real, something honest, on my own terms. And it wasn't for sale. "No," I said, my voice quiet but unwavering. My father's eyes widened slightly. "No, Noah, be reasonable. This is a very generous—" "It's not about the money, Dad," I interrupted gently. "It never really was. I don't want your money, I just want the truth to be out there. And I paused, looking directly at Harper, then at my parents. I want to be left alone to live my life, the life I'm building for myself." Harper looked like she was about to explode, but my mother put a restraining hand on her arm. My father just stared at me, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Surprise? Disappointment? Maybe even a reluctant, grudging respect? I couldn't tell. "There's nothing more to discuss," I said, moving towards the door, holding it open. "Thank you for the offer, but my answer is no." They left in silence, the air thick with unspoken words. As I watched them walk down the dingy motel corridor, I didn't feel anger or even sadness. I felt relief, a profound, cleansing relief, the kind that comes when you finally stand in your own truth, unshakable. I felt a surge of pride, not in defeating them, but in choosing myself. I understood then that true freedom wasn't about money or apologies or even their approval. It was about knowing my own worth, independent of anyone else's valuation. And that, I realized, was priceless. The hands that had come offering a buyout had come too late. I was already free. After they left, life didn't magically become perfect. The online drama eventually faded, as most things do. Harper's Academy limped along for a while, but without genuine credibility or frankly the talent to sustain it, it slowly fizzled out. I heard through the grapevine she moved on to some other get-rich-quick scheme. My parents never reached out again, and honestly, a quiet part of me was grateful for the distance. The silence that had once been a wound now felt like peace. I continued tutoring. My little business, born out of desperation in the daily grind, flourished. I was good at what I did, and word of mouth is a powerful thing when it's built on genuine skill and care. I eventually saved enough to move out of the Starlight Inn and into a small, clean apartment with good light and a desk that didn't wobble. It felt like a palace. The money I earned, the money that was truly mine, built on my own hard work and integrity, felt different. It felt clean, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do with some of it. I thought about my grandmother, about her legacy, about her unwavering belief in the power of education to change lives. I thought about kids like David, kids who had the talent but lacked the resources, kids who felt overlooked or marginalized, just like I once had. So, I started a small scholarship fund. I named it the Eleanor Mercer Educational Fund, after my grandmother. It wasn't huge, not at first, just enough to help a few deserving students each year with books or test fees or a bit of tuition. I focused on kids from underprivileged backgrounds, kids who were often told they couldn't, kids who just needed someone to believe in them, to give them a chance. The first time I awarded a scholarship, I sat down and wrote a letter to the recipient, much like the thank you notes I had once received that had meant so much to me, telling them about my grandmother, about the importance of finding your own voice, your own path. And as I wrote, I realized something profound. I didn't need an apology from my family. I didn't need their validation or their approval to build a full, meaningful life. The healing, the real healing, came from within. It came from taking what was broken and building something new, something good, something that reflected my own values. It came from transforming my pain into purpose. My life isn't what I once imagined it would be, back when I thought family was a synonym for unconditional love. It's quieter, simpler, but it's also richer, more authentic. It's mine, and I learned that sometimes the greatest act of revenge isn't about payback. It's about outgrowing the hurt, about building a life so full of your own light that the shadows they cast can no longer reach you. It's about finding your own worth, not in their eyes, but in your own. And that, I've found, is the most lasting hope of all. Forgiveness, for me, isn't about forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It's not about going back to how things were, because honestly, some doors are best left closed. It's about moving forward, without dragging all those old wounds, all that heavy baggage, along with you. I didn't rebuild my life to punish anyone or to prove a point. I rebuilt it to be free, to be whole, to be me, finally. And if you've ever felt erased, overlooked, or made to doubt your own worth by the very people who should have cherished you, I hope my story reminds you of one crucial thing. You can still build something beautiful, something strong, out of the silence, out of the space they left behind. Your story isn't over. It might just be beginning. If this story touched something in you, if it resonated with your own experiences, please leave a comment below. I'm reading every single one, and your stories matter too. And if you believe in the power of reclaiming your voice, your truth, and your worth, hit that subscribe button and stay with us here at TK Revenge Story. We've got more stories to share. Sometimes, giving, even in small ways, can be a part of our own healing journey. If you feel moved to support the channel, you can use the Super Thanks feature. It helps us keep telling these important stories. Because somewhere out there, someone needs to hear that healing is possible, and that even in the deepest silence, you are never truly the end of the story. You are the beginning of a new one.